Just to quickly take you through what we're going to be going through today. What I have here on my screen, I've got two separate panels open with the intention that the one panel is, shows you what the things are that we're going to work through. The idea is this can also become a useful reference point in the video, because at the end of the day, this video is going to be roughly 2 hours in length, and trying to navigate through it to find the actual part of the training that you want to get to can be quite tedious. So how it's going to work, the field that is highlighted in blue is the one that we will be discussing at that point in time. Once I'm finished with the field, I'm going to tick it and it'll be marked in, it'll immediately turn to green, and the next field that we're discussing will be blue. So if you're opening up this video again and you're looking for a specific thing, part of the training, we're going to be working through this chronologically, obviously. Just go and look for the thing that is blue. Whatever is blue is the thing that is being described or discussed at that moment. Right. So before we get to anything else, we're going to have a look at the Google fundamentals. Please note, I'm not necessarily going to go through the outline again. That is what we did in our first session. So we're literally just going to go and talk through the different skills that you need to take note of when we're training in this. So with Google fundamentals, on the one hand, I think we will refer to some of the online content as well. I usually just go to this online platform that we have to get to the slides. This is probably the easiest way to get to it quite often. So, right. So when we're running through these fundamentals, the first thing that I really want you to take note of is this slide here in particular. Right. So this is almost the only bit that I'm really going to refer to the presentation. The rest of it we won't really spend a lot of time in the presentation. But it's really vital that people understand the concept of what the fundamentals are about. The fundamentals are about focusing on the underlying core principles of coming to terms with using the Google platform as a whole, right? So the first thing that we are going to tackle, and the things that we want to cover today, obviously, will be focusing on module 1, which is the account, and then your Google Chrome, and how you use these things effectively. And then, right, how you use these effectively. And then I see Trevor's just having some issues with his sound. Okay, but I'm happy it's coming through clearly then. Right, then module 2 is the one that's focusing on Google Drive. And those are the two that we're going to be covering, right? So these are the two that we want to focus on specifically today. And we're going to be running through it as quickly as possible so that we can cover all of it in the 2-hour session that we have today. Then obviously module 3 and 4 is what we'll be covering next. But when we focus on the fundamentals, this is where we stop. This is it. That's the fundamentals that we're talking about. And I think that needs to be a very, very clear message when you are presenting module 1 of Google fundamentals, is that you get this message across, and that we also get this whole process across that we're referring to here. So if I take these images away, it's all essentially about how do I get digital content from a teacher all the way to a learner or to a classroom. And that's where G Suite comes in. It acts as a bridge between these two things, because we always, this is the big challenge for teachers. I've got digital content, I need to get it to my learners. I'm not going to be carrying around 30 flash drives all the time, because that's what teachers are used to, having the information on flash drives. We need to find a different way to move content from one point to the next point. Right, so that is the key thing to understand around the Google fundamentals itself. So the first thing that it all boils down to is focusing on your Google account. What is a Google account? Now, when we're talking about a Google account, there are two parts of a Google account, or not two parts. The Google account needs to be understood in its totality. It's, for most people, they use Gmail as their Google account. Now, Gmail is not the only Google account out there. You can actually register your own domain if you wanted to. If I really wanted to, I could go and register the domain van Niekerk, and I can go register it as a Google account, and I could create an email address called jaco@vanniekerk.com, and I can ensure that that is a Google account. Any domain can be registered as a G Suite domain, and I think it's something that we really need to try and push from our side as well, because the G Suite domain is free for schools, and all the accounts are free. So schools have access to the entire G Suite platform for free. Now, the great thing about the G Suite platform is you don't have to have a school's account for it to work, but there are definite benefits if you have one. But your account is essentially the thing that links everything together. The one thing that can essentially give you this connection across multiple platforms. So when I want to use my account, so when we're talking about the account, because there was a question about the account earlier regarding the VSG email addresses and when to make use of our personal email addresses, etc., etc. Now, at this point in time, there's no clear, there's no specific guidelines. The idea behind the VSG email addresses that you receive, all of you receive, those are Microsoft accounts. So in other words, they give you access specifically and most importantly to MS Teams, which obviously has its entire, Office 365 has its entire online platform that it also has. We're not going to go into that today because we're focusing on the Google platform, but that's what the VSG School account is primarily for. Now, how the communication happens within your school, within your district, etc., that might differ. So it might differ in terms of which address you're going to use and which one you'll end up using. I feel that if you don't have a school address, a VSG Schools account gives you a slightly more formal, I suppose, account to use, but that obviously means that you need to be comfortable with the online Outlook platform as well. So you'll need to be able to access that or have it set up on your Outlook calendar or your Outlook system itself. Whereas your Gmail, sometimes it's just a little bit easier to access, I think, for a lot of people, especially on mobile devices, etc. Now, if you've got a Gmail account, then I'm sure one of the first things that you will have picked up is the fact that it can kind of sync across different platforms. So what we want to spend quite a bit of time on now is the whole differentiating between our accounts and how that actually adds a lot of value to our browsing experience. So the Google account is the key that unlocks the door to the whole G Suite platform. And you can register different Google accounts. Some people like to have a Google account that's a personal one. Some people register an account that they call Mr. Van Niekerk at gmail.com, and then that's my school account. That's fine. You can have different Gmail accounts. Ideally speaking, it's great when a school moves to a G Suite platform, because then you can register yourself, have an account where it's your name at the school's domain.com, all right, or .co.za or whatever the extension might be. So the Google account is the thing that connects it all. Now, when we connect to our account, remember we can connect to our account on multiple devices. The idea and the value behind that is to be able to sync the information across the different devices. My cell phone, I can connect to my Google account. In my instance, I've got a work laptop that I can move between the office and home as I need to use it. But I've also got a desktop at home that I prefer to work on when I'm at home. So what I've done, what I ensure that I do is I log onto this account on all those different devices. And we're going to look at different ways of logging onto that account. The benefit of that is what I do on one device automatically reflects on the next device. And what becomes even more useful is if I'm moving around, and this has happened to me quite often when I go to a school and they are on their computer and I just need to access something quickly. I've got my laptop with me, but it's just easier to just quickly go onto that machine, log into my account, and then access my information. Right, so this is something that I think a lot of us probably do all the time and know quite well. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. But the way in which we do it is sometimes a little bit more of a how should we say, we don't always do it the way I think that works best, right? So Now we're going to get to the logging into Google Chrome, and I really want to emphasize why this is a useful thing to do and the value of doing it. Right. So connecting an account. Now we're going to have a look at logging into Chrome. Now in the top right of Google Chrome, you'll see there are two icons over here. You quite possibly have logged in, and Google Chrome has now, with some of the newer updates, what they do is just logging in kind of automatically logs you into Chrome as well. So you might see, if you've got a profile picture, you might see your profile picture appearing there twice. Now I want to just explain the difference between these two places of signing in. What happens here over there when I've signed in here, it means that I've signed into, I've opened up Google Chrome and I've signed in to my Gmail or to my Google Drive or to my whatever it is that I'm using, and I'm using that account. Now, many of you, if you click on it, you might have more than one account there, especially if you are working on a computer, a shared workstation, right? You will click on that and you might end up seeing a lot of different accounts there. So anyone who has opened your computer and used your account will have that. So I can do this, and I can go and add another account, and I then add a personal account here. As you can see, I've had to sign in with another account in the past. I left it there just to show as an example. But the problem is that account stays there, and I can click on it, and quite often we forget to unmark the password recognition, the fact that it remembers our passwords. Now, the way that and this is not the best way to do it. I hope my voice is still coming through. This is not necessarily the only way to do it, but this is the way I feel works quite well. And that is by actually logging into Chrome and creating multiple profiles. So the bottom one is not the one we're looking at. We're looking at the top one. If I click on the top one, you'll see over here, I've actually got two other Google accounts that I've already logged in here, right? So we've got this Google account, which is just the account we use for administrative purposes. And I still have my old account that I used at the school. So I can click on this. And what's nice about this is the minute that I click on this, what actually happens is, rather than opening a new tab, it opens a new Google Chrome window. So you'll see, here's my old Chrome window that I still have over here. Sorry, I just want to quickly get everything set up here again. So here's my old Chrome window that I still have open, but I've actually opened a new one as well. Now, the useful thing about this, the thing that's most useful about this is when I start searching for things and when I start doing things in this instance of Chrome, whatever I do here is not reflected on the other part. So that thing that I'm sure everyone has experienced if you're using Google at all, where you're opening a file and now you need to request access because it's the wrong account, etc., etc. That whole process becomes a lot simpler if we just use this way of switching between accounts. So you can see there I'm logged into both, and there I've logged into both. Now, the other thing that becomes even more useful is when we actually, or what's also great about it is everything that is happening here, my browser history, everything gets saved into this profile. So if I in fact click here and I say add, when I add a profile, so now I'm going to just add my personal profile. I removed it so that I can show you what this looks like. You can create a desktop shortcut. So you're actually essentially like creating extra little Chromes that you can launch. So I'm going to add this. What it asks me here is, do I want to log in, get started? But I'm already a Chrome user, so I just need to sign in. I'm going to just enter my personal account, if I can type today. Right, so now that I've entered my personal account, you'll see it's going to log in here. I'm just going to confirm that. And what's great about it is now that I've logged in, I'm just going to, all of those things are just, yes, I'm in. I'm turning on the syncing, all of those things. And there you can see it quickly loads my, loads my bookmarks. It even starts, the next thing that it does after doing that, you can see pop-up blocker. These are extensions. So it immediately starts loading my bookmarks, my history, my extensions, everything that I use inside of Chrome. So kind of what's happened here, what Google have done is Chrome has become almost like a mini operating system that's going to lie on top of Windows, and will do everything. If you're operating inside of Chrome, we'll do everything in there. And what's great about this is I can actually, in using it like this, you can quite literally make sure that your whatever you're doing with one thing is automatically syncing across the next thing. On your one browser syncs to the next browser. So when we're talking about browser syncing, if it were to happen, for example, that my laptop got stolen or my computer crashes and doesn't want to work anymore, I haven't lost anything really, because all that I do is I open a new Google Chrome and I log in with my Google account, and everything that I did on my computer is immediately reflected on the new one. And it's a great little way of when you're working on a different workstation to actually then just log in with that and load all of your extensions, load all of your bookmarks, etc., etc. So if you're working on a shared computer, it's a good way of doing it. However, now this is the big part with a shared computer that I think is very important to take note of when we're talking about browser syncing, etc. What happens now is, seeing as I've done that, my account is now accessible there. So anyone who opens this computer can click on that and access my account. You do need to reconnect every now and then, depending on the settings within your domain, but it's now become accessible to everyone in the account. That is why there are different modes of browsing that become quite useful and important to use. The first one, and I think the one that you're probably going to use most of the time, is the guest browsing. If I click on guest, what happens again, it launches another instance of Chrome. Now, if you look at the bottom on my start bar over here, I've got a couple of different Google Chromes open here. Here's my Google Meet, which is on my other monitor that I'm looking at. There's a new tab, and then we've got our tick sheet that we're going through. But there's an entirely new icon here to completely separate it. And the same thing happens if I were to, for example, launch a different one. So you'll see there's a new Chrome icon, and there's a new, I'm not going to go through all of them. I think you get the idea. So it creates new Chrome instances. Now, the nice thing about the guest Chrome instance, as you can see here, everything that is happening within this is a temporary thing. So I can still go to my drive, or let's say I'm going to go to gmail.com, and I can still, it'll open up, but the difference is it's not going to even remember any account. It won't remember any password, anything like that. I now need to remember that, right, if I've got my account, I can now sign in. Right, now once I've signed in here, that means this guest window that I've opened has now been signed in with this account. So from here, I can quickly switch to Drive, etc., and I will remain signed in. But the great thing is, the minute that I'm done, I literally just click on Close, and none of my activity is recorded. None of what I've done on here gets recorded at all. So if you're operating on a machine that is a shared device, multiple teachers are using it, using the guest mode is actually an incredibly important thing to keep in mind, just for security and safety reasons. Because if you don't use that, if you're just going to use Chrome normally without guest mode and you switch off the computer, the next guy to switch on the computer is logged on as you, which is obviously something we don't want. So guest mode is a very, very important and often overlooked part of Google Chrome. Now, those of you who might have played around with Google Chrome a little bit more and might know these, some of these, the tools a little bit better, you might know of the incognito window as well, which is a slightly different way of doing something similar to guest mode. The big difference between incognito mode, you'll see there, it looks like a little spy icon. What makes incognito mode different, and it's important that you discuss this with people that you're going to train, incognito mode is different in that with guest mode, you start with a blank canvas. So there's nothing there, nothing is remembered at all. With incognito mode, all that essentially does is it stops tracking any activity. So if you open incognito, it will still remember, as you can see over here at the top, I've still got all my bookmarks. It will still remember all my passwords before this, but it's not going to record anything new. So you can see here what happens here is the browsing history is still going to be recorded, or is not going to be saved. Browsing history, cookies, information, incident forms, all those things. So anything new that you add will not be recorded, but everything that has been added will be recorded. So this is also sometimes a useful thing to use, but a lot of people tend to want to use incognito mode when they're actually looking for guest mode. So keep in mind that it really is a useful thing to be able to have incognito mode and guest mode as tools to log in. So just in short, if we're just going to have a look at both as logging into Chrome and browser syncing aspect that we're discussing, is you need to understand the normal way of logging into Google Chrome and creating profiles. Sorry, the other thing that I forgot to show when we're talking about browser syncing. So let's say, for argument's sake, you actually want to log in with your account into Chrome so that you get all your history and your bookmarks and your passwords, but it's a different computer, so you just want to quickly do something on there, and then you want to remove it. It's pretty straightforward to do. If you click on the icon where it says if you click on the gear icon over there, it shows you the different accounts that I have. Now, what I've done here, or it just makes it easier for me quite often, is I've got different profile pics. It's all me, but just gives me a sense of which one are we referring to. Very formal one for school, very informal one for my personal account, and then just a nice generic profile picture for my actual wced.info one. So profile pics are quite useful to distinguish between different accounts. Now, if I just want to remove, for example, the school one, because I don't really use it very often, I simply click on the three dots and remove this person. What that does, all of the information is still recorded on Google's server somewhere, but if I want to recover the data, I first need to add this person again. So what you can typically do is you can go to someone else's computer, you can go add your profile, it loads all of your information, do whatever you need to do, and then just remove your profile when you're done. It's kind of a way of taking over someone's computer for a brief moment. It's a very, very useful trick to do. Right. So the next thing we want to look at is a couple of Chrome tricks that I think are very useful and very important when you're going to be working in Chrome. The first thing that is absolutely vital when you're going to be using any kind of browser these days, and these tricks are universal across all different browsers, is just tab browsing. Now, tab browsing simply means I open up new windows or new tabs for things that I'm looking for. So let's say, for example, I was looking for Adobe Premiere Rush earlier today. Don't know if anyone has used it before. Just to find out a little bit more about it. So let's scroll down and we find a few links. Now, what many people do is they'll find a link and they'll click on it, and then immediately they go to that tab. And then getting back to the previous thing becomes quite tricky. Now, just a useful trick that people need to keep in mind, if we're going to use multiple tabs, if you hold the control button and you click on something, it immediately opens it in a new tab, as you can see at the top. So if I click on a couple of things, I actually want to review a few different sites, all of these. So what's happened now is simply by clicking on these, I can switch between the different tabs. And if none of them actually are what I'm looking for, then I can just close all of them and just go on searching for the next thing. So I think it's especially when you're looking for things like images, etc. It's a very useful trick. Tabs can very quickly become very, very, very cumbersome. So be careful of having too many tabs, because they can eat away at your at a computer's memory, and then simply closing them is as easy as that. And if you want to open new blank tabs, you can just press on the plus button and it'll open a new blank tab for you. And you can, in that tab, you can do whatever you want to do. Now, okay, we'll get to that part later. The other option, of course, if you want to open an entirely new window, if you hold Shift and you click on something, it opens an entirely new window. So as you can see, this is broken away from the window that I have over there, but so that I can actually review this part over here. Now, when you've opened up new tabs, what you can also do with tabs that's, I think, quite a useful thing to be able to do is if you click on the tab icon itself over there and you drag it, you can actually, as you see, I can add it onto this Chrome instance, or I can drag it and I can add it onto this Chrome instance so that I can click and add different ones together. Now, what the most useful part of this is, I suppose, is if you've got two sets of information next that you want to actually be able to access next to each other. So let's say we're going to open up this site and we want to open up a second site, this one over here. It's just loading quickly. And we want to compare the two sites with one another. Now, we can switch between the tabs like this if we want to, but what works a lot better is if we click on the tab and we drag it so that it breaks out into its own window. We click and hold, obviously, and drag. And then if you use the Windows key and we just say Windows left, for example, now it's going to go and add itself onto the left side of my screen. What I can do, if I want to go even further and have lots of little tabs open, if I press Windows and down, it'll go to an even smaller little block here at the bottom. Right, so now I've actually got 3 blocks open next to each other when I'm reviewing content. In this instance, it doesn't really make sense to do that because the screen size itself doesn't really help, and you've got this whole bit at the top. But just remember, it's a useful trick. And of course, that is not a Google trick. That is a Windows trick. The Windows key, left, right, up, down. So you can open a Word document and an Excel spreadsheet next to each other doing that. Windows left, Windows right, Windows up, Windows down. Play around with it to basically create your the perfect workspace that you want to use. So again, click and drag. If you drag these tabs out, it actually breaks it out into an entirely new block. Right. So I think that covers that little trick. The other thing that is quite useful for a teacher, especially. That can be quite useful for a teacher is if we want to zoom in on certain, if we open up Google Chrome in general and we've got a whiteboard that we're projecting in front of our classroom, then there's a lot of things happening around here that can be quite distracting. So something that a lot of people aren't aware of, if you want to turn your thing into full screen mode, you can either click over here on your options again, and there's a button there that turns it into full screen. Or what I always use, I just use F11. So this takes your browser window and it will basically go fill up the entire screen, right? So if we are, if we've got something like this over here and we want to focus in on some of those things, we can do that. However, if we feel we still want to get closer in, if we use the mouse wheel, holding Control and a mouse wheel, it'll zoom it actually zooms in the image to a very large, well, in a way that works well on a whiteboard. So if you're typically in a classroom using something like an e-beam or an interactive whiteboard and you really want to zoom in on something so that learners can see it, it's really helpful to be able to maximize your window using F11 full screen and then holding Control and the mouse wheel zooming in and out, right? The other option is also Control and the plus and the minus if you don't have a mouse wheel. Plus obviously zooms it in, minus obviously zooms it out, and then reset takes it back to where you were. And if you find yourself in F11 mode, full screen mode, and you forget the shortcut key because it can be a little bit confusing how you get out, if you just move your mouse to the top, you'll see a little X button appears, which means you go out of full screen mode if you forget the F11 shortcut. But as I said, F11 has always been, in my opinion, the quickest and the easiest way to get to it. So those are just a couple of Chrome tricks that I think are quite useful. Tab browsing is absolutely invaluable. If you haven't been doing tab browsing yet, you really, really should. Window browsing, again, it's something that I personally can't live without. If I can't have two windows next to each other to compare data, especially if you are working in a spreadsheet. So if you are doing marks and things like that, if you're going to start marking digitally, taking information from one from one thing to the next thing. It really is very, very useful to do. But what I also forgot to show you is when I've got my things set up to be left and right, there's a little, you can see there's almost like a faded part in the middle where I can set the size of these things. So I can actually move it like that if I wanted to make the one screen bigger than the other one, or the one window at least bigger than the other one. I'll move it back here, and then we can play around with the size of this. Right. So, right, I think that covers the Chrome tricks. There's a lot of other Chrome tricks that's very useful to show people. I'm not going to go into all of the different little Chrome tricks. I'm sure if you are a regular user of Google Chrome, you've also got your own little tricks that you use. One of the ones that I think is also people tend to forget. If we open a new tab, the shortcut key for opening a new tab is Control-T, by the way, and switching between tabs is Control-Tab. I enjoy using shortcut keys quite a bit. Right, so if you're opening up a new tab, if you type here at the top, this is just an extra little trick that you don't need to teach them, but it's useful to teach them. Right, so the default search engine in Google has been set to use obviously the Google search engine if you're going to use Google Chrome. But a useful little trick that you can use as well, if you're on Drive, if you actually type drive.google.com and hit space, it immediately searches in your Google Drive, right? A new tab, the shortcut is Control-T, creates a new tab, and then Control-Tab switches between them. Control-N, by the way, opens a new window if you want to open up a new window, right? So, but this little trick that I want to show you over here, so if you type drive.google.com, hit space, it takes you immediately to searching in Drive. So you don't actually have to open up Drive and then go and find the file, if you can remember the file's name. Now, I'm not going to show you how to do it, but you can actually set your thing up to do it that way. I've got mine set up to use keywords that when I type Drive and I press space, because Drive, my Google Chrome knows Drive is a keyword, it immediately goes to and searches Google Drive. I've also got mine set up when I type contact and I press space, it searches my Google contacts. These are all little tricks and little things that just to show you how you can, given time, really set up your Google Chrome to work for you. There's one more, now that I remember it, regarding the Chrome tricks that I actually wanted to just focus on again. Sorry, we're not at connecting extensions. Control-N, yes, Control-N opens up an entirely new window. Right, one other thing that I like to do, you'll see over here, I've got lots of little shortcuts there that I like to just, because I know what these different things are. So my Google, my Gmail is 90% of the time it's open, but as you can see, this takes up quite a bit of space. So what you can do here is if you right click on this, there's also an option to pin a tab. If you pin a tab, it becomes very small over there in the corner. And what's also quite cool is pinned tabs. Right, new tabs, Control-T, yes. A pinned tab, when you close Google Chrome and you open it up again, all the tabs that you pinned are ones that will open up automatically. So quite often, what my setup looks like when I'm at work is I've got calendar open, I'll pin this, and I quite often have my Outlook open as well, and I'll pin this, and I'll have WhatsApp open as well. I'm not going to open it now. So you can see if these were not pinned, these are three reasonably large icons, or they would take up a lot of space. But now that they're pinned, it only shows their little icon over there. As long as I know what the icon means, it's easy for me to access these. So pinning of tabs is, again, it's quite a useful little trick to have in your arsenal, right? And then you can just close it again if you don't want to use it. So that's another thing to keep in mind, pinning of tabs, another little Chrome trick. The search thing, there are some things that automatically have built in. I think Wikipedia is another one. Yes, so if you type wiki in space, it immediately searches Wikipedia. And in this way, you can actually Okay, I haven't set up DuckDuckGo yet. I mean, you can set up search engines, but it's something that you can go search and discover, I'm sure, how to do it on your own. Just to give you a few examples of things that you can. I'm not going to give away all of my secrets. Right, so the next thing that we want to look at is extensions. Now, extensions are something that's growing in popularity and in functionality very, very quickly. There's a lot of different extensions out there. And I think one of the key things what Google has done recently with extensions to make them a lot better. In the past, there used to be an incredible memory leak, because whenever you've got extensions loaded, they're all running and they're all draining computer resources. Now, I'm not sure what they did, but they've managed to make it the whole thing a lot more efficient. So if you notice over here that there's just 4 extensions that I've got over there. What extensions are, these are little plugins essentially that you download and add to your Chrome to give you quick little functionality. So these are, for example, Bitly. If you don't know what Bitly is, it's a very useful way of shortening things. So with a Bitly extension, rather than having to go to a site and create a shortcut, I literally click on that button and the Bitly has been created for me. Over here is Loom, which is a video recording tool that I use a lot, just to create quick little instructional videos. Again, I don't need to go to a page. I just click on it and it opens up. Similar to, I know that provincially we rolled out the Screencast-O-Matic, I think is what we're using. Screencast-O-Matic, Loom, similar type of thing. So you might have engaged with extensions before. This is a little calendar tool that I click on. It opens up my upcoming calendar events. It looks a little sparse, but I promise you there's quite a few other things happening in between. But what's quite cool about this calendar plugin is if I have a meeting, I click on it, I just click on that little icon over there, and I immediately jump into it. And it shows me here 6 days. That's the next session. That's this Zoom session that we've got next week. And then Wednesday, obviously, the other training. There's a recorder, but anyway, there's lots of different ones. Now, they've also cleaned it up a little bit, because in the past, it used to be this long list of stuff that you would have in the top right corner. But now, if you click on the puzzle icon, they actually show you, these are some of the extensions that I've got loaded. You can actually add and remove these extensions in terms of the display as you need it to. So Grammarly is an extension that a lot of people have installed, for example, but it's not something that you often open up necessarily. It's something that runs in the background. So if you want to, how the extensions now work is if you click on here, you can pin an extension. If you pin an extension, it will display over there. If you want to unpin it, you just click there and it removes it again. So in this instance, one of the ones that I just pinned because we had training on it yesterday was this Chrome audio capture. If I click unpin, now it removes, it's not part of my extension list anymore, but it remains there. So there's lots of different little ones that you can use. One of the ones that someone mentioned, I think in our last session, was this custom cursor for Chrome. Now you'll notice the custom cursor works well sometimes, and then sometimes it just disappears. So at times it's great, and at times you just wonder where on earth did it go now. It's not a big fan of showing up within the G Suite platform, but the cursor is an example of that. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm just quickly going to remove this one, remove from Chrome, and then I'll show you how we add an extension. Right, so the extension has been removed and is still changing my cursor, my icon somehow. Right, and that is unexpected. Okay, so it is still somehow managing my cursor, which probably means it might just be on this page. But anyway, so if I want to get extensions, the easiest way is just simply go in Google search and look for an extension. So we're going to say mouse pointer Chrome extension, and it will take you to the Chrome store, custom cursor for Chrome, which is the one that I ended up using. And it'll just take you straight to the Chrome web store. Obviously, the other option is to go to the Chrome web store and go and install the cursor. So the Chrome web store, if you go to the Chrome web store itself, chrome.google.com/web store, you'll see there's a whole bunch of different extensions on here. Screencastify, as we spoke about, is a very popular one. And then Zoom Scheduler, Netflix, all these different ones. So there's a ton of them out there. There's a ton of them that are great. There's a ton of them that are absolutely horrible. So it's a bit of a trial and error. Okay, I must refresh the page. Yes, okay, that makes sense. Right, so now it's gone. So here is the one that we were looking for, was the custom cursor for Chrome. And it is as simple as clicking add to Chrome. What it'll do is it'll ask you, can I add custom cursor for Chrome extension? You add the extension, and then, right, it's just going to quickly download something and then load it onto my Chrome. I think there are some of them that ask for permission. I haven't really come across any of them that really ask you for permission to install and things like that. Once you've said install, then it'll install. And there you go, custom cursor for Chrome has been added again. Right, oh yes, Ashrik was also pointed out, opening the window in incognito mode. Another shortcut that you can use. Right, Control Shift N opens a new window in incognito mode. So adding an extension is as simple as that. Now, what I recommend in training sense, and I'm sure many of you have extensions added already, there are a couple of extensions that are absolutely invaluable. For example, if we're going to go to, what are we going to look for? Random article. I'm not sure what we want to use. We're just going to go search on Wikipedia for a random article. Random number generation. That seems like a random enough article. So if I've opened up this random number generation article on Wikipedia, I'm in a classroom, I want to show this to my learners, then a tool like Google Translate is a very, very useful little trick, right? So what Google Translate can do for you, obviously you can open it up and translate single words, but you also have this option to translate this page. So if you do that, it'll open up the translation. Mine has already automatically been set to Afrikaans. So that actually has gone and translated the entire page. So if I'm a teacher in a classroom environment and I want to show this to my learners, again, I hit F11 and I go and maximize it. And there I've got a Wikipedia article in Afrikaans about random number generation. Very, very quick and easy. We know Google Translate is going to be, will make mistakes, of course. It's not all of it going to be 100% accurate, but just with regard to that, remember that Google Translate uses machine learning. So the more that it's actually being used, the better and the smarter it gets at translating effectively. So Google Translate is a very, very cool and very useful tool for them to add as an extension. And I think it's a good introduction to using extensions. Then there's lots of different ones out there. Grammarly is another very popular one. I think the ones that we listed in our training specifically have to do with Google Translate and Grammarly, using those two specifically, and adding them as extensions to Chrome to be able to engage, or just so that they understand what these extensions can do. And as I said, there's lots of other good ones out there. There are lots of ones that I had on here that I've removed since, that you'll play around with as you discover new ones that add value to your browsing experience. But those ones are a good introduction to it. If you're not using these extensions yet, go have a look. They are very useful additions to what you're doing. For example, for me, I use the Bitly extension almost on a daily basis. My calendar extension, without it, I would miss every meeting. And then obviously by recording things, etc. And then there's a couple of ones that are cute additions to have, like Bitmoji. I'm sure you've heard of Bitmoji, or I've seen Bitmoji. At least lots of teachers are starting to use Bitmoji to just personalize slides and personalize what we are doing. So that's essentially how we go and connect extensions. Again, if you want to, you can go through the whole route of going to the Chrome Web Store and showing them what the Chrome Web Store actually looks like. This is fine. This is also a useful thing to do. If we click on the puzzle icon and we go to Manage Extensions, it will bring you to this place over here, which becomes quite confusing to lots to lots of people. So I tend to try and steer clear of this. I often just say, look, just search for an extension on Google and then add the extension, and then they'll usually get the idea, and give them a couple of extensions that work quite well. Right. The next thing we want to look at, bookmarks and bookmark folders. Now, this I think is more of a personal preference, because a lot of people don't necessarily use bookmarks as much, and what they'll end up doing, and bookmarks I think often are more of an annoyance sometimes because we don't keep them organized. The key thing with bookmarks and using bookmarks effectively is staying organized and making sure that you actually make use of bookmark folders. Now, what I want to show you quickly is, if I open up a new tab, right, then I've got a whole list of different bookmarks over here. And I've got single icon bookmarks here as well, which are useful because I know what these icons actually stand for, so I don't need to have names added to them. Then I've got one or two other ones that I have added names to them so that I can access them quickly. And over here, you'll see lots of bookmark folders, which, again, this is all about working quickly and easily and efficiently. Now, these bookmark adding something as a bookmark is really straightforward. If I'm on the if I'm actually on the page, the little star icon over there just means bookmark this tab, right? The shortcut, if you want to use a shortcut, makes absolutely no sense in my opinion. It's D, Control D is the shortcut. But because everyone always forgets that, I always just say, look, click the star and that'll bookmark the website. Now, by default, you will not necessarily have as many folders here, so your bookmarks will simply, in all likelihood, just save on the bookmarks bar by default. And it gives the name, the entire name of the site that I found, right? So let's say, for argument's sake, I want to bookmark Wikipedia. Right now, I'm going to go to the Wikipedia main page. I want to bookmark this. So it's going to save it as Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia, which is, I think, an incredibly unnecessarily long name, because in all likelihood, if you're going to bookmark Wikipedia, you will know what it is. So you can either then just remove the tail end of this. Let's just quickly save this in, we're going to save it in the bookmarks bar, Wikipedia. So you can save it like this, and then say done, and and your bookmark should be saved. Now, I've just zoomed in my screen, so my bookmarks always display on one page. I don't ever want to see this little thing appear there, because that doesn't really help me a lot. But what's now going to happen is I've got a bookmark that'll look something like this, right? But because I actually know what the Wikipedia logo looks like, there's no reason to really have Wikipedia written over there. So I can right-click on this. I could rename it, or just edit at least, and just remove the name entirely. So if I do that, it leaves only the icon, which is a very useful way of getting to it if you know the icon. So for example, everyone knows what WhatsApp's icon looks like. So I don't need to have this one written out as WhatsApp web, because it makes absolutely no sense. I know what it is. So obviously I'll just remove the name and I'll just save it like that. And in that way, you create these cute little icons that actually are very quick and easy to access. What I also tend to do, you can switch your bookmark bar on and off, depending on how you want to use it. So in this instance, I've got it on. My bookmark bar is always on, but you can just leave it off if you want. To switch a bookmark bar on and off, you go to the three dots, bookmarks, where it says show bookmarks bar. Right, so show bookmarks bar, Control-Shift-B. That's the shortcut that I always use. Control-Shift-B opens it up. If you turn your bookmarks bar off and you open a new tab, you'll see the new tab immediately load your bookmarks. Because the expectation is, if you open up a new tab, you probably want to be able to go to some page that you have recorded over here. So keep that in mind with the bookmarks. You can either keep them on or leave them off. Now, when bookmarks, in my opinion, becomes incredibly powerful is when you have actual folders that you put things in. So for example, I've got a Google Drive folder that has subfolders and all sorts of things like that. So when I need to get to files and folders on my Google Drive, I can access it very quickly and easily. Our webinars, we've got provincial claim forms, all sorts of different things that I can link to quickly and easily, that I don't need to take a long route in order to get to a certain location. So creating a bookmark folder becomes a very useful thing. And I often say one of the easiest ways to get them into doing it, to start doing this kind of thing, is just to create a folder for Google Drive. So in other words, we right-click anywhere in the bookmarks bar, and you'll see there's an option add page or add folder. Now I'm going to add a folder. I'm going to call it new. Once you start getting to the point where you've got a lot of bookmarks, it becomes useful to work in this little window that you see over here, which is kind of like I'm going to show you what it looks like now, the bookmarks manager, because you end up having lots of different things. So we can create a new folder. I can click anywhere that I want to actually create my new folder. We're going to create it in temp, for example. I'll say make a new folder, and I'll just call this is a dummy folder. Save, and there we go. There's dummy folder, and new is in there as well, all of that. So I'm just going to delete that one, right click and delete. And in this way, you can actually structure your Google Chrome that you can get to things quickly. Forms are an example of, I know we've got a lot of different forms in our district that we need to keep up to date with. What's the form for this? What's the form for that? What's the form for this? So, and we're not going to remember these things. Now, obviously, a lot of us just then go back to the email, go find the email, open up the link, etc. These are all things that just slow us down. And if there's one thing that a teacher doesn't have, it's time. So all of this is geared towards the idea of working faster in Google Chrome with your Google account, right? So that's basically, that covers everything that is part of Google Fundamentals 1. So Google Fundamentals 1, just to summarize again, account, what the account actually means, what a Gmail account is, what a G Suite account actually is. We're not really going to discuss all the benefits of a G Suite account, because I think that starts coming into play a little bit more when we get to Fundamentals 2. So that's the one part of it. And then the other part of it is working in Google Chrome and working with Chrome effectively. I know there was one trainer, I can't remember who it was, last time who mentioned that completing Fundamentals 1's evidence of learning is quite challenging when you're doing it in Firefox or in, I can't remember what he was using. And yes, you're right, it will be difficult because we obviously, our teachers are not, well, they might be using Firefox, but they're very unlikely to be on some kind of Unix or Linux system. And also, Chromebooks, maybe, but unlikely that a teacher will be working on a Chromebook. Chromebook's more likely what the learners will be operating on. So we are focusing on what you're going to do if you are on a Windows, well, not even Windows, it can be Mac as well, but if you're working within a Google Chrome environment on something like a Windows or why am I forgetting it now? Apple environment. Of course, if you're on a Unix environment, I've got a machine that uses Linux Mint, where I also run Google Chrome on it, and all of those things apply to that as well. Right, so just before we go on, I'm just going to pause here for a second. Are there questions? I know we're going quite quickly, but are there any questions?
Hi, Jacko.
Yes.
Trevor, yeah, Jacko. I just wanted to say, you think you know quite a bit, but you've shared some very useful tips with us. I've already removed the names on my icons. So I've just got a WhatsApp icon and a Gmail icon. Great stuff.
Just a quick thing that a story. I remember one of my ex-colleagues, he really bought into this idea of bookmarking things, and he started bookmarking everything that's useful, but he never organized anything. So when I finally got to show him where to go, he had these little arrows, and when he clicked on them, there was a list of 120 different items. none of them renamed, none of them organized. So that is the danger of not doing it. So just be careful of falling in that trap.
Thanks.
Right. So with regards to CMIS, yes, Wazirio, 100% correct. If you need to do things in CMIS, because CMIS has some strange restrictions and things loaded on it, then yes, a lot of that has to happen, unfortunately, in Internet Explorer. And in fact, it doesn't. You can't even use you can't even use the Edge or even the new, more updated Edge. You need to use the old Internet Explorer for CMIS, for everything in CMIS to work. But if that's the case, you can easily just open up Internet Explorer, do the things that you need to do in CMIS there. But when we get to the G Suite platform and a lot of other things on the internet, the old Internet Explorer is just not going to cope with a lot of the new online applications and things. It really struggles with a lot of it. I can't tell you which one specifically, because I don't really use it. But for CMIS specific purposes, yes, you need to have a look at using the old Internet Explorer. Any more questions?
Yeah,
right, now, just to show. Hello, yes.
You can continue.
Okay, great. Just to show you quickly in terms of being able to complete the evidence of learning. Now I'm going off the top of my head here, so I might be if there's one or two things that I'm missing out now, just quickly remind me. But essentially, what you're looking at is you need to open up a guest window. I've got a guest window over here. It can just look like that, which you're going to align to the left. You've got another window that you're going to align to the right. You have to have extensions loaded. We're just going to open up some tabs, have some things over there, some folders over there. I'm logged in. So what you're seeing over here is essentially a pass mark for the first assessment. Just being able to get your own thing set up like that. And all that you do then is you can just do a print screen or a snipping tool. We use the snipping tool and upload that file to Google Drive and send that link through to us. Then we can see that you know how to log into your Chrome, you know how to add bookmarks, you know how to load an extension, you know how to open up tabs, and that essentially shows that you've got the necessary knowledge to train Fundamentals 1. Obviously, there's a lot more finer nuances involved. But we're not gonna. But that is what essentially part of Fundamentals 1. Right. So Fundamentals 2 is all about using Google Drive and everything about Google Drive. So the more they can know about Google Drive, the better, because Google Drive is the heartbeat of the whole G Suite platform. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to go through a couple of these things. Now, if you've used Google Drive, then most of what I'm going to show you today should be pretty straightforward. I think a lot of the Chrome tricks are things that people are not so much aware of, but Google Drive, if it's something that you have been using, you probably already understand it reasonably well. So we'll pause here and there with the finer nuances, but I think we're probably going to move through this a little bit quicker than we did with the other part of it. Right, so the first thing, getting to Google Drive, is as simple as once they've logged in. Remember, when we start with Fundamentals 2, the assumption is they know how to log into their Chrome, because that's part of what they need to learn in Fundamentals 1. Not that Fundamentals 2 requires you to do Fundamentals 1, but as a trainer, you can present it in a way that you not entirely assume, but you should be able to safely assume that they understand that part of it at least. Right, so once you've logged into Chrome, then getting to Google Drive, there's a number of different ways to get to it. The one thing that they need to familiarize themselves with is the waffle, as they call it. All right, and please make sure that they understand what the waffle is. It is not an actual thing, because I've seen people who have heard of the waffle, and then they now need to try and get to the waffle. And what do? They open up Google Chrome, and then they go and search for waffle, right? And then this is what they find. This will not get them anywhere. So this can confuse some people. Just be careful that they understand this. Right, so there is the Google waffle. that shows us the different Google apps. Now, something that you can also point out in this instance is that you can move things around in the Google waffle. So if Jamboard, for example, is something you use all the time, you can move it right to the top. By default, Google Drive and Gmail should be right here at the top. Classroom won't be very high up because unless you are on a G Suite for Education package, then Classroom is usually right here at the top. And then the rest of your Google apps are all going to be over there. So spend some time just to show them a few things. A lot of people are always very surprised when they find YouTube there because they don't realize YouTube is actually also a Google product. But spend some time to show them this is where you find the waffle. The other way to get to it, of course, is if you've got a bookmark, if you've created a bookmark. The way that I always get to it, and I think this is also something that is useful for them to know, even though I don't think a lot of people do this, but a lot of the Google products work like this, that you actually type the thing that you are looking for, Drive in this instance, .google.com. Now, what's useful if they type it in there, by default, Drive, I'm 90% sure of this, but by default, drive.google.com is loaded as one of your search tools. So once you type drive.google.com and you hit space, you go into the search Google Drive option, which is very, very useful to know. And I think the other thing, I didn't even mention it now when we spoke about Google Fundamentals 1 and Chrome. They must know the difference, because this is one of the most common issues that I often have to deal with as an e-learning advisor, the difference between the top search bar and the actual Google search bar, right? Obviously, if you enter something here, it'll search automatically, but a lot of people try and enter things in here. And if you're going to type Drive over here, it will probably get you to Google Drive, but it's a lot more of a clumsy way of getting there, right? If you're going to type Drive in the top, google.com, not so many O's, right? It'll take you to Google Drive. But most people tend to use the waffle to navigate between different things. And obviously, if you're in one of the G Suite apps, the waffle will always be there and easy to access and click on and navigate between your different, between the different platforms that you need to go to. Now, if you are in a school environment, you will, or in a G Suite for Education environment, there will be some, you might have some kind of logo added there, your school's logo, etc. And then I always try and encourage teachers to actually load some kind of profile pic as well. It adds a personalized element to it, and it just makes, I think, the thing a little bit easier to really follow, or not easier to follow, but especially if you've got multiple accounts, and if you're sending things to different people and sharing with different people, profile pictures make this whole process a little bit easier. And people like personalizing things a little bit. Okay, I'm not going to go into how you do that. So it's just something you can recommend that they do. Right, so it's as simple as that to access Google Drive. Right, so the next part is uploading to Google Drive. Now, to upload to Google Drive, there's a number of different ways to do it. My Google Drive is a little bit messy these days. Slowly but surely, it's getting more and more messy, which is not a good thing. We're going to get to that part as well. But uploading to Google Drive, there's a number of different ways to do it. The one way of it is that you can click on the plus icon, which will take you to file upload or folder upload. Another option, you can click on somewhere in the screen. It won't work if you do it there. You need to click somewhere in the actual browsing screen. So they've got this quick access bit here at the top that is not necessarily going to add value there. So you right click over here, upload files, upload folder. This is also a quick way to create new files, but we'll get to that a little later when we get to Google Fundamentals 3 and 4. Remember, 3 and 4 deals with the apps themselves. Right, so simple as that, upload file, upload folder. Now, when you upload, I think it's pretty self-explanatory what an upload of a file, how that works, but you can then show them and actually physically upload a file. One of the things that's useful about uploading a folder that I've experienced in the past, remember, the nice thing about any folder that you upload is if I select a folder with lots of different subfolders inside of them, so documents, for example, I want to upload this documents folder. Everything that is in here gets uploaded with the same folder structure. Now, again, I'm not going to do that now, but the huge advantage of this, I don't think there's anything in here. Right, so I'm just searching for folders to upload. So the advantage of this, let's just upload this training folder. I'm not sure what's in there, but let's just go for it. Right, so the useful thing about knowing this is Windows Explorer, just normal going around in your Windows C drive or whatever, is a lot faster with making folders and folder structures, especially if you need to make big, complicated folder structures. So something that we've done quite often in our district is if we need to create a big, complicated folder structure, we first go and create it in Windows File Explorer, and then just click and drag that, and then it will create all the folders for us. But the other thing that's nice about this is many teachers have a folder that calls itself School, which you can just click and drag, and then all of it goes onto Google Drive. Now, obviously, the advantage and something that you really need to stress here when we're talking about the uploading to Google Drive is the value of this cloud-based thing now. Because I've uploaded this folder called training, these two documents that I've got in here, one a JPEG and the other one a PowerPoint, these two files are now available on the cloud, which means that if my flash drive gets lost, which many teachers have experienced, or gets corrupted, or there's a virus on it, or for whatever reason I can't access it anymore, those files are now safe and accessible in an online environment, and they will not go anywhere. They will remain there for me to use. What's also very useful about that is I can access these files on any device that I've got access to, or that I use my account. Remember, the account unlocks access to these files. So in other words, I can use my laptop, I can use my phone, I can use a desktop, I can use a computer at the school, I can use any device. As long as I've got my account, I can access these files. So that's the value of the cloud storage part of things. Now, when we get to the cloud storage, the uploading part of things, I think it's important that people understand what happens now with the different kind of accounts that you have. The G Suite for Education, and I think this is probably one of the most significant, if not the most significant, distinction between the two. A normal G Suite account, or at least a normal Gmail account, has limited data storage. I can't remember exactly what it is. Someone else on here might just quickly remind us what a Gmail is limited to. But a G Suite for Education account has unlimited. There is no limit whatsoever to the amount of things you can put onto Google Drive. Right, 15 gig, there we go. Which 15 gig sounds a lot, but it really isn't a lot once you start actively using a lot of this, especially once you start generating video content. Then 15 gig goes very quickly. So if nothing else, that is one of the biggest reasons why moving to a cloud-based environment is such a valuable thing. I know one of the schools that we supported is a school that supports learners with hearing disabilities. So they had to create, during this lockdown, they had to create multiple videos of sign language, because there's no other way to do sign language other than creating videos. And because of that, we very quickly got them set up with a G Suite account, so that they could start uploading these videos to the learners, to the learner accounts, to their own drives, etc., so that everything becomes accessible online. 15 gigs went within the first week almost, but because they are on the platform that they don't need to worry about that. So that is a very, very important distinction to make. Now, the easiest way to upload things, I didn't even explain that now, is if we've actually, and let me just quickly find something that is a sensible thing to upload. Right, so if I've got a folder over here, and I've got a couple of things that I want to upload. So let's say, for example, I've got this coding and robotics image that I want to upload. The quickest way to do anything is just to click and drag. If you click something and you drag it there and you drop it, it will immediately load. And the same thing applies for a folder. So if I click and drag a folder, it's just going to go up there. Now you'll see I'm just uploading things left, right, and center because I don't need to worry about the space. I do need to worry about my own internet cap, so I'm going to stop that now. So it really is as simple as that, uploading files to this, folders, files, etc., etc. So when I want to download something, the same thing applies. I just select whatever I want to download, right-click, and just say download. Right, so there we go. And what will happen if it's multiple files, it's going to zip your files first, and then it will download the zip folder. So what you can also show them quickly is how you open up a zip folder and how you extract files in a zip folder. I'm not going to do that now because I'm going to assume that we all understand how to extract zip files. Right, so there we go. There I've downloaded my zip file, and all I can do now on my side is extract these files again. Right, so I think that pretty much covers the idea of uploading, definitely, and then downloading from Google Drive is really as straightforward as right-clicking on something. Folders as well, you can right-click and you can download an entire folder. Okay, so right, so now we're going to move to folder structures and how we organize our content. So when we've got different folders, the one thing that you need to keep in mind is folders in Google Drive. The different things that you put in a folder, the sharing rights, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves a little bit now, but sharing rights of a folder gets inherited by the files in that folder. So in other words, if I'm going to set certain permissions on this folder called temp, it's going to have certain, it's going to apply these sharing rights to the files that are in that folder. So for example, these files over here, these folders over here that you see, all circuit resources, audio notes, classroom, etc. You'll see that these folders are all have little icons over here. It looks like a little icon of basically an account, which means that they are all shared with someone. Everything inside them is automatically then shared with the people that have access to that folder. So creating sensible folder structure becomes very important for a school to manage. And for individuals to manage as well, how you organize your different files and folders. Now you'll see my things are, in all honesty, needs a little bit of care and attention because slowly but surely it is starting to move around a little bit too much, and or I'm creating too many folders in my main drive folder. But organizing folder structure, we're going to get to file organizing a little bit later as well. Becomes very important. So folder structures, in order to navigate your folder structures, there's obviously different ways of doing it. We can literally, if I'm going to go into our e-learning shared folder, I can click on it and I open it up and there are folders within that, and we can click on training and there's a folder within that, and we can click on online training and there's a folder within that, etc., etc. So folder structures are pretty straightforward, and here at the top you'll see how I'm navigating to the different parts of that folder. Now, another way of doing this quite quickly is by clicking on this little arrow over here. So this will open up very, very similar to File Explorer. It'll just open up everything that's in my drive, and I can then also go and find little pathways, open up like that, and go to training, and then go to online training, which is where I am now. So if I were to, for example, move things around, so let's say I want to, this file I found is in a wrong place, and I need to move it somewhere else. There's different ways of doing it. Two different ways of doing it. The one way, we can click on it, and then we can drag it. Oh, wait, no, right, so click on it and drag it, and then find the folder that you want to move it to. So let's say, for argument's sake, just want to make sure I can find this thing again. We're going to move this to Training Plan 2020. And it moves into that folder. Oh, wait, we don't want to do that. We're going to move it into the ICT training. Right, let's just move it to that point. Okay, so now what happens is the file is going to move to ICT training. I'll explain what that message is in a minute once we get to the sharing part of things as well. So now I've moved the file. So this can sometimes be a little bit of a hassle when you're moving things around, in that way. Especially what I always did in Windows is I always made sure that I had 2 folders next to each other where I can move things from 1 or 2 windows at least. Window with the one folder, window with the other folder. This click and drag is a lot easier. That doesn't work in Chrome, unfortunately. So that is definitely a bit of a drawback. So you can do it like this, where and again, this is adjustable to make it a little bit bigger if you want to see what's going on here. But alternatively, what you can also do, and I must say I tend to use this tool a bit more. If you right-click on it, you'll see there is a Move To icon over there, right? Move To means it opens up this little dialog box over here, which I can then navigate and I can find, and we're going to get to this dialog box a little bit later again. It's a useful one to understand. And we're just going to move it back to online training because we realized, wait, we should not have moved it. And then we say move here, and it says this message, we'll get to this later, and I've moved the file back to the online training. Now, here you see the file is moved again. In the same way, we can select multiple files, and we can move multiple files. We can move folders as well. We can click and we can drag those things around. So folder structures are important in organizing your content in a way. And remember, whenever you're in Drive and you need to find anything in Drive, and this isn't part of this training specifically, but I think it's something that people need to know how to do. There's the search in Drive option here at the top. And what you have to understand is, because it is after all Google that does this, the search in Drive is a very powerful tool, because there's a lot of different things that you can do here. If you click on the drop down search options, you'll see it actually gives you a lot of different things that you can set. For example, you can say, I'm only looking for things that are owned by me. I'm only looking for presentations. I'm only looking for something that has been modified yesterday. So in other words, if you open up a slide, you did something in it, but you honestly can't remember where you put it or what the thing's name is, you can really organize it. You can really find it like that. Now, what can happen, and we'll talk about that when we get to the sharing rights as well, what can happen is if you've got files in folders that have shared access and other people delete your file, sometimes people don't know where to go and look for it. Remember, files will not be deleted unless you deleted them. Then they first go to your trash, and you can still find them even if you say in trash at least. So then you can go and search for the presentation. If you know what its name is, you'll find it and you can restore it to where it was. It's something that you need to keep in mind, because people are always a little bit panicked that someone's going to delete their files and they don't know where to find it. The search function within Drive is a very, very powerful tool. So remember that little drop down that you've got in there. And if you really want, you can actually use a lot of these little identifiers. I often use this owner me extension if I'm only looking for things that I own. So you don't have to open up the drop down. You can just type it out, owner colon me, right? So search options, there's a lot of things in here that you can actually set, or that you can actually go and search for in this way, right? So just keep that in mind if you're looking for files and you've lost files. Right, now we're going to get back to, let's get back to our training folder. Yeah, this is a different training folder, it's fine. Right, so now we're going to look at the different sharing rights, because this is, I think, where everything can go very right or very wrong with people when they're using Google Drive, if they don't understand how sharing rights actually works. Now, you'll see here, there's actually a few files in here, and it tells me who the owners of these files are. These are all mine, and this one is owned by one of my colleagues, Lucinda Kutsia. What's happened here, and I'm going to show you how that works as well, is this is actually a file that I own that I transferred ownership to her. She didn't move the file, which she actually should have done, but it's not the end of the world. But you can do that. That's another little thing that you can do that sometimes we don't always know about. But let's just take this default lorem ipsum document and show you how the sharing rights works on this. Now, I'm very happy because Google, I can't remember when exactly, but they really ramped up the sharing, just at the very least, the interface of the sharing tool. So now it really is, I think, a little bit more intuitive than it used to be. So if I right click on this and I click on the share icon, the little share icon over there, right? Now I can click on this and it will open up the share dialog, and I can look at the different ways of sharing. What it'll do is it'll immediately open up an example of some of the people that I share with regularly. So we'll just select Ashik, who's running the chat for us today, and he's just going to be added to this because I know he is a contact that I use by default. Now this is another part where the G Suite domain becomes very useful, because if you've got a G Suite domain, you can activate a global directory, which means as long as you know the person's name, it'll automatically fetch that user's account. So let's say there's we'll use this Johanna. Okay, these are people that I have sent emails to. That's not a good example. Let's say there's Shoal somewhere, right? Okay, so again, taking from my account. But anyway, these are not good examples. But if you know the person's name and there's a global directory activated, it'll first obviously go and look in your own contacts that you've added. Now, those are all people that I've added already. But then next it will look in your global directory to see if the person that you're trying to add is in your global directory. So let's see if there's a ZU. Right, so there we go. Zakisa, I'm not going to attempt that surname, but these are all people that you can see are in the WCED domain as well. I don't know any of these individuals. So Swat, I think, is a person who attended some of our trainings in the past, but I don't know any of these individuals. However, they're in my global directory, so I can easily add them to anything that I want to share, which is immediately a very useful thing to be able to do. Then when I share it with someone, I can choose what kind of rights I'm going to give them. So in this instance, editor, commenter, viewer are the different levels that we can give, that we essentially can give someone. When we give them editing rights, it means that they can actually go and do anything that they want to do with the file, because they've got full editing rights to it. They can delete it, but remember, you are still the owner. So if they delete it, you can always recover it, and you can always revert it to previous versions if you give them full editing access. You can turn them into commenter, which means they can view it and they can add comments to your files, or you can turn them into a viewer, right? So now, if I can decide to what extent do I want to give Ashik access to this file, should he be able to actually make changes? Should he only be able to be a commenter, or should he only be a viewer? Now, it really depends on the file that you are sharing, if it's something that needs to be edited and modified and added to, or if it's only supposed to be something that that you as an individual needs to have access to. But something that they've added, it used to be there, but it used to be quite well hidden. But what's quite useful is if you click on the share with people settings, this gear icon here in the top right, you've actually now got easy access to these two little options, which I think is very useful to have access to. And one of them is the editors can change permissions and share. So what I can do is I can say, look, I'm going to give Ashik editing rights on this document, but I don't want him to be able to add more people to edit it. In the past, it used to be essentially if you shared it as an editor, then they can just reshare it with anyone that they want to. The setting was there, but it was always hard to find. And this setting was also always there, but again, not easy to find. And this is a very useful thing. Viewers and commenters can see the option to download, print, and copy. So if someone is an editor, you can't remove their ability to download the file and print it. But if you are actually sharing it with a learner, for example, and you don't want them to be able to download the file or to print it or to copy it, then you can remove that option from them. Just remember, you can't stop them from making a print screen or things like that. That is impossible. You can't remove their own functionality on a computer, but it removes a lot of the G Suite access to this thing. So they can't copy it, they can't download it, they can't print it. And And then, of course, another thing that you can consider whether or not you want to do this, depending on what you are, how you are sharing it. If you've got the notify people activated, what's going to happen is it'll send an email to Ashrik that I've shared this file with him, and I can say, "Hey, Ashrik, check out my file." Right? So, and I'm going to do it now so that Ashrik gets this kind of spam in his inbox. Sorry, Ashrik. And I'll send this file to him. Right? So he now has access to this file. He can access this file in a number of different ways, as we pointed out. Now, the same thing with sharing rights applies to folders as well. The thing is, if I do this and I share a folder, everything that I've done in terms of sharing rights on the folder gets applied to the files inside. So again, I'm going to share this file with Ashrik. I'm not going to notify him this time. I'm just going to make him a viewer, right? And I'm going to add those settings. Now, just take note, when we are applying settings to folders, we don't have all the same kind of permissions, depending on the files that are in that folder. You'll have to play around with that setting a little bit, but I mean, you can have a look at how that works exactly. Again, editors, we can change his permission to access and share this with other people, but we're just going to keep it like that. Right, this time I'm not going to share it with him. I think we've shown it. Now, the next thing I want to show you quickly is the link sharing thing that happens within Google Drive, which is, again, a very, very powerful little tool. So you can either right-click and go to Get Link, or if you click on Share, you'll see it opens two dialog boxes, actually. If you don't start typing in a name over there, the bottom one remains open. You can click on that, and it kind of highlights that little one, and that is the link sharing function. Now, when you activate link sharing, what that means, if I'm going to use this drop down, by default, everything is set to restricted. Right? Restricted means that link sharing is not actually active. Even if you're going to say copy link, it's not really going to do much for you. So I've got two options here. I've got Western Cape Education Department or anyone with a link. Again, if you're organizing, if you're operating within a G Suite environment, if you've got a school package loaded, that means I can set it like this, Western Cape Education Department, which means that the link viewing settings that I'm going to apply applies to anyone who's trying to access it with a @wced.info account. So if you're at a school, you can set this to anyone who has got an @school.co.za account can access this file, and no one outside of it. So this becomes very nice if you're trying to, if there's a single document that needs to be shared with all the learners and all the teachers, but you don't want external access to it. Then you can share it like this. We can set it again. It's a slightly different setting that we've got over there. Right, so anyone in this group with a link can view. But very often, we are not necessarily operating in G Suite environments. A lot of us are still operating in a Google environment. So now we can change it to anyone with a link can view. Now, what makes this very useful is you now actually don't need to have a Google account at all for this to work. It's just a link. It creates a very long link, but anyone who has that link can now open this file and view, or I think it's a file, can now open this and view it, right? And if I'm really going to take the chance, you could actually say anyone who has the link can become an editor. Just a warning, be very careful when you do this that you know what you are doing. Because if you say anyone with a link is an editor, literally anyone has access to that file. What's quite cool when we get to Google Docs and we look at the shared things, is to actually share a folder and share a Google Doc or something like that in this way with a link that you paste in the chat screen, and then you just say go crazy. So that it just illustrates the idea of sharing. I think it's a very, very fun way of really showing what it does. And a lot of teachers through that exercise are able to kind of draw connections of, okay, so how can I use this effectively? So keep that in mind. Now, a question that often pops up is what then happens, let's see what we've got in here. All right, so what then happens if I want to unshare something, right? So there you see there's a little icon over there. I've got that icon over there indicates that it's something that has been shared with people, and I need to unshare it. Now, one of the ways that, or one of the things that also obviously helps is this little info button. If I click over here and I say view details, it gives me a little bit of an instant indication of who actually has access to it. Now, in this instance, what happens is I'm the owner and I've activated link sharing. That's what that little icon means over there. So I haven't shared it with anyone specifically. I've just activated link sharing. An activity will show you what's actually happened in the folder, right? So I can see who did what. I added a bunch of things over here, and I've changed a lot of the links. Now, if I wanted to, I can then right-click on this, and I can click on the share button. It's a bit of a weird concept, but if I click on the share button, it doesn't actually mean I'm sharing with someone. It just opens up this dialog. And if I want to deactivate it, I can just do it through that process. I know it's a question that I feel quite often is, how do I unshare something? There's no unshare button. There is no unshare button. This is true. You have to click on the share button, go into the share panel, and then unshare it in that way. Right. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So this info panel is often a good way to track who's got access to something. So let me just quickly find something that has specific people access to it. So we'll take the e-learning shared folder as a good example. If I click on info, you'll see there we've got I was the one that created it, and then my colleagues are on there, and then our interns are also on there. So the 5 of us have access to this full editing access to the files that are in our e-learning shared folder that we can use in however we want to use it. And again, important to take note of, files that you put in a folder like this are automatically assigned the sharing rights that are in there. So something we spoke about yesterday, when you want to add audio clips to Google Slides, etc., a good idea is to create a folder, get the default setting to anyone with a link can view, and then load files into that, because if you then put them into other files, you don't need to worry about changing the settings for that anymore. I know in the past what I've also had is I had a folder called open link sharing, but it becomes a big mess. But anything that you put in there, you know that the link is automatically shared. And if you want to share a folder with someone, just take note. 2 things I actually want to show you quickly. Sometimes confuses people with sharing of things. If I'm going to share a folder with someone, you can, right here at the top, you'll see there's the URL of the folder. We can copy that and we can just paste it somewhere. Obviously, this one is not shared, so I'm not going to do that now. But we could just copy that link and share it. Obviously, you can right-click and say get shareable link. If there are videos, just take note of this, because this is something that people get confused with. And the same thing applies to PDFs. If you play a video, what happens is, I can play this now. Right, let's just give it a second to actually start playing. Right, so there's a video that has now started playing over here, but a lot of times people want to then share this link at the top. This is still the link to the drive folder. It's not the link to the video. Take note of that, because what actually happens is the video doesn't open in a new window. So if you want to share the video itself, you need to right-click on that file and say get link to that. And the same thing applies to a PDF. So if I've got a PDF, let's see, there's a PDF that we used. So this is our webinar program. Same story. You'll see here, that's not the link to the PDF at all. So be careful of that kind of sharing that people sometimes run into, because they think, okay, I've opened up the PDF. I only need to copy the URL and then send it to someone. So it doesn't, PDFs and basically anything that actually opens up in like an internal viewer. So even things like I don't really have PowerPoint, so there's an Excel sheet, right? So there's an Excel sheet, same story. It's not actually opening up in a new. It's not actually opening up in a new tab. It's still opening up in a viewer that is built into the Google Drive, right? So with those things, just right-click and get link. Generally speaking, if it's files, it's easier to do it like this. It's safer to do it like this. Well, that's how I've always felt about it. Right. So the next step, what you need to do is, if things have been sent to you, if the files have been shared with you, and we're going to get to the drive Google Drive and Gmail thing, I think that's the last thing we'll tackle. When we get to the shared with me part, because shared with me, if I'm going to click on shared with me and I start looking for things in here, it becomes, it can become quite a mess quite quickly. Now mine is quite organized because I generally, well, it looks a lot more organized than I thought it was going to look, because a lot of the times things that are shared with me are actually sent to folders directly. I often ask people, here's a folder, put your information into that folder directly, rather than just sharing it with me and then having it added to my shared with me. But if something has been shared with you, you can always go click on shared with me and you'll find it in there. Now, what Google has done slightly differently now is they've changed it in the sense that you don't actually add it to my drive anymore. That's how it used to work. You used to right click on something and say add to drive, and then you move that file into a location in your drive that works for you. Now they've got a new tool that they call add shortcut to drive, which in my opinion makes a lot more sense. Because what that does is it doesn't move the file for the owner in any way, and whatever I do with it does not affect the location for the owner, but what it does is it just creates a shortcut. So let's say I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to say add shortcut to drive. This little dialog will pop up and it'll ask me, where do I want to move the shortcut? I want to move it to, we'll just call it the training folder, add shortcut, and that file has now been added to my training folder. Now, I'm not the owner of this file, someone else is the owner of this file, but there's a whole bunch of different people that can edit the file. And the nice thing about that now is when I want to open it and I go to my training folder, you'll see there's the file. And it also appears slightly different. There's a little arrow over there, which indicates that it is a shortcut. It is not the actual file itself. However, if you double click on it and access it, it'll act as if it is the file itself. It acts in exactly the same way. So it hasn't really changed from the way that it used to work, the add to drive. They've just kind of renamed it and added a little icon over there. The one thing that has changed, however, that you couldn't do in the past, that you can do now, is I can create a shortcut of my own files and add it to different locations in my own drive, right? So it's a slightly different way of doing it. So if you want to have, if you've got a drive folder structure and you've got different people who have access to different folder drives, to different folders in your drive, you can add lots of different shortcuts that all links to the same file. It takes a little bit of wrapping your head around it, but it makes sense quite quickly. A question that I haven't fielded yet that we do get sometimes is this whole idea of offline access. Please note you can actually access Google Drive even if you're offline. It's obviously going to be completely impossible for me to illustrate while we're on an online training session, but you can set certain files to be accessible offline. So even if you aren't on the internet and you open up Google Chrome and you enter drive.google.com, you will get to drive.google.com and it will load certain folders and things for you that it saves in your machine's cache memory. Anyway, it'll save it on your machine, and you can set certain files to be accessible offline, which means that you can open them up offline, you can edit them offline, and then you can obviously, once you connect, you just sync to the online platform again. Right, so I think we've covered the shared with me and shortcuts. Right, file organizing, I'm not going to talk a lot about file organizing. This is, a lot of it's personal preference. Different people have different ways of organizing their files. But you need to emphasize the importance of file organizing, because the more people start using Google Drive, the more they start putting things on it, the more of a mess it can become. I try and clean it up every now and then. As you can see here, this is already, it looked a lot better not that long ago, because by default, everything just goes and gets copied into your My Drive home folder. So you'll have to try and keep mind of trying to keep things organized. Otherwise, it just becomes a mess, and you have things like that eventually: untitled, 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 untitled. What I've always done what I've always done, and what I've always enjoyed in terms of folder structure is using dates to get to add some structure to it. Now, I haven't been part of the e-learning team very long for you to really see the dates thing, but with folders within folders, I like to have a 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and then just move things into folders like that. It's just a personal preference. Everyone has their own way of doing it, but file organizing is very important. Two other tricks that I think are quite useful in terms of file organizing is using starred folders. So I'll be honest, it's something I don't really use a lot, but I know a lot of other people like using starred folders. I use my bookmark folders, and my bookmarks does kind of the same thing for me. But what's nice about starred files is if you are working on something at the moment that you realize is something that you need to spend a lot of time on. So let's say this PowerPoint template, for example, or National Book Week flyer was something I was working on. Then you can just star it, add to start. You'll see there's a little star that appears next to it. And then when you open up Google Drive, it'll appear in your starred files. And then once you're finished with it, you can just say remove from start and it goes away. So this is a way of highlighting certain folders that you need to access quite a lot. So our digital resourcing folder is one such folder. E-learning shared folder is one that I access quite a lot. The e-teacher provincial registrations is also one that I get onto quite a lot. I see Anita has joined us, so she'll know I have to play around and work around in a lot of things on there. And then obviously online training is what we are doing a lot of these days. So I've got a few things there with starred folders, but it's something that I don't use all that often. But a lot of people I know like using the starred function quite a lot. And then something else that people use a lot is this priority thing where we can build different workspaces. Again, this is something that I don't use all that often, but I know a lot of people use workspaces very effectively. So you can see here when I was building the pedagogy training module, I had loaded some of those things in here. There are some of our sites, but you can also see some of it is a little bit empty because I don't tend to use this all that often because I prefer to, again, a lot of what's happening in here, I end up doing the same thing in my bookmarks. But again, it's useful to be aware of the starred folder and this priority spaces folders, just so that you are able to steer teachers towards the organizing of their drive. Because remember what we said, at the end of the day, Google Drive is really, to a large extent, the heartbeat of the whole G Suite platform. Understanding how Google Drive works well, and then obviously the file sharing that goes with that. Getting to terms with how all of that works is an absolutely fundamental part of being able to operate in the rest of it effectively. Just so that, just on an entirely different note, now I think we're going to get back to that a little bit later. Right. So again, file organizing is a bit of a tricky one to really explain to you how you should explain, but you need to spend some time emphasizing the value and the importance of it. I know we've got a let me just quickly module 2. But if you actually have a look at the presentation, I remember what I loaded in here as an example of that is not really a folder thing, but it's more of a trying to stay organized, because I'm sure everyone has seen a desktop that looks like this, right? So I think this is a good way of just illustrating to the teachers that we don't want to see this kind of thing. This can happen on your desktop, and it can happen even quicker on your drive. So just stay organized, keep it neat and tidy. That part this is part of the presentation. And then, yeah, I've given a couple of suggestions. Group files by category and use dates. Don't be scared of having multiple nested folders. Think carefully about how you organize information with access rights, etc., etc. Right. So, oh yes, I'm not a big fan of this. I know lots of people do this. It's something that frustrated me to no end at my previous school. But people like to use an asterisk and then a tilde and then an underscore and all sorts of things like that to move folders to the top of a long list of other folders. If that is happening, then I think it becomes important not to do that, to try and organize things in a different way, right? The very last thing, because I see some people are starting to kind of greet me already, that we want to look at is Google Drive and Gmail and how we integrate these two with each other. So I'm going to use this example that my colleague Hiron has sent me, because I think it has an attachment. Right. No, well, yes, it kind of has an attachment. Right. So we'll just have a look at this at this example quickly. So what I've done, what happens is I've received a folder from one of my colleagues via Google Drive. He has shared this folder to me. Now, obviously, if I get this will be in my shared with me folder, but Google automatically sends me a notification that this thing has arrived. So what makes things easier for me, and this is a habit that I've learned to just keep things organized. So self-directed learning experiences, the folder that he sent to me, with any file that you get, whether it's a Google file, whether it's a non-Google file, a PDF, a video, a Word document, an Excel sheet, doesn't matter. All of them do the same thing. They give you this option to add to your drive, right? In this instance, it's going to say add a shortcut to my drive because it's already something that exists on a drive. If it's not something that exists on a drive, it's going to give me the option just to directly add it to my drive. So if I click on that, add shortcut to my drive, I'm going to quickly add it to my drive. I need to add it to ICT district support, and then I'm going to add the shortcut over. I'm just thinking, yes, this is in place. Right, so add shortcut here. So now immediately the file is added to a sensible place. I know now where it is. I like to try and keep my inbox neat and tidy as well. I've got it. Now I can just delete the file, the thing. And I don't need to go back to my, I don't need to actually go back to my Google, or I don't need to actually get back to Gmail to go and find information, right? So let's look at the next example. Well, I'm not going to use that. I know she's actually in the session. So let's just say I'm not going to do. Trying to think of what's not sensitive information. Right, so this I think won't be too bad. Right, so here's a PDF that this teacher sent me. Now a PDF obviously a little bit different because now you'll see this add to drive. It doesn't say add shortcut to drive because it's not a file that's already on Google Drive specifically. So now I can just, if I click on add to drive, and I'll show you now why this is so useful. I can either download the thing, obviously, as is standard, but now add to drive, it's going to add it, and it's going to tell me organize. Very important. We just spoke a lot about file organizing. Click on file on organize. If you don't do that, it just goes straight to your Google Drive root folder, and that becomes a mess very quickly. So if you click on organize, it again opens up this little box here that you'll get more and more used to the more you use it. And now I can move it to wherever I need to move it. This one I don't really want, so I'm just going to move it into, let's just move it into training folder. Okay, so normally what I need to do with this file is I'm probably just going to forward it to someone because it's not something that I need to use. But now because I've saved it on my, because I've saved it to my drive, what's very useful now is if I'm going to open up Compose, let's say I'm going to write a new email. I want to write an email to Ashrik, right? And I'm going to say, please see, let's just say registers, and I want to send these registers that the teacher sent to me. So normally we would have downloaded it and now we need to attach it again. That uses an unnecessary amount of information because whenever a file is sent to you, it's kind of already stored somewhere in your folders. It's just not stored in your Google Drive folders, it's stored in your Gmail folders. So when you add it to Drive, what you're actually doing is just moving the file. But because I've saved it now, you'll see there's lots of different little attachments, one of them being insert files using Drive. So if I click on that, it takes me to my Drive, and I can now navigate and I can now insert any kind of file that I want to insert. But what's useful, obviously, is it actually goes to recent files. Now, I know I just saved that file, so there we go. there's the file, and there's some of the other things that we've been accessing so far in this session as well. So I can just attach that one, and I can attach this one. Now, when we're attaching from Google Drive, please note you've got an option to either attach as a Drive link or send as an attachment. When it comes to PDF, you don't really need to send it as a Drive link, I suppose, except if you've made comments or edits or things like that on the PDF itself. Now, that's an entire story for another day. But if you're going to be sending Google documents, so let's say this Google Sheet, then it makes a lot more sense to, well, I don't actually have the option to send it as an attachment. I have to send it as a Drive link, which means that the file that I'm sending to him is a file that is now shared between the two of us. Now, what's going to happen with this, if I'm going to insert it, I think Ashik already might have access to this, but let's just quickly insert something that he won't have access to. So, recent, right, so let's just say I'm going to select, I'm just trying to find something that he will not have access to, right, so you won't have access to this. Right, so let's just say I'm going to insert this. Now, if I'm going to say send, now Ashik just needs to make sure that when he gets this, I'm just going to remove his access anyway afterwards. So if I'm going to send this to him, what will happen is it's going to ask me someone needs access to view the files because I'm sending a Drive link, right? All that I need to do is I can now say I'm going to share it with him as a commenter or as an editor or as just a viewer. So let's just say we're going to share it with as a viewer. Remember, if you're going to say don't give access, then it's not going to help because he's going to get it, he's going to click on it, and then you're going to get those annoying Ashik has requested access to view this file messages. That happens when you've sent something with the wrong kind of access to someone. So if I send this to him like that, there you go, and I've simply sent that message to him without having to download anything or upload anything or anything like that. So the bottom line is it is very useful to start using Drive and Gmail together. Files that are coming in, you save to Drive, and files that you need to send out, you can just attach various files from your Drive. Now remember, if you attach it from your Drive, there's no uploading and downloading or anything like that required. It's already on Drive. Especially when you start using the G Suite platform more in terms of using Google Docs and Google Sheets and Google Slides and all the different parts of it, right? Then it becomes incredibly valuable and incredibly powerful to actually use these two together, to integrate them. And the key thing is we don't really want to end up having to go back to our Gmail and then scroll and scroll and scroll. Where was that attachment that guy sent to me? Rather save it to your Drive, and then it's easy to find. Obviously, there's a search in mail function as well that has all the little tools. We could spend an entire day discussing all the little things and tricks you could do in Gmail as well. Play around with it. It's really customizable. But bottom line is, in terms of what the teachers need to start taking note of, is how we use Google Drive and Google Gmail and Gmail together as a unit. Right. So that concludes everything that we need to go through. Are there any questions at this point in time? I know that's a lot of information to try and process.
Yaku, the chat line is quiet.
I see, sir. I hope that's because I have explained everything well and not that everyone is a little bit overwhelmed. Yes, Renee, the task, remember, all 4 modules, just regarding the task, with last week's session on Wednesday, we discussed what the tasks are. So we're not gonna go back to what those tasks are. I'm just gonna ask Ashik, I think, just to attach the link to the course outline again, and you'll see the task is at the bottom of that. Right, so in other words, you've got, for module 1, you need to kind of set up your display, and for module 2, you need to create a folder called Google TT, which looks like this. There's the link to the course outline. Thanks, Ashik. I can't remember all the details, but it's essentially you need to create a folder that has limited sharing rights in the sense that it's only viewable, and then there's a folder in that that's called editable, yes, and then there are 2 shortcuts in there. One of the shortcuts is a file that you own. The other shortcut is a file that someone else owns, something like that. And then you also need to have a file in the viewable that can't be printed or downloaded. But all of the instructions, all of those things are on there. Right. So
Jaco, a question here in the chat from Wazir.
okay, I see. Right. Wazir, I'm first going to answer your question, then Trevor's question, and then I see Lunga also has a question. But Lunga, I'll just hold on for
Hello, Jaco.
the other ones. Is this Lunga speaking?
Hello, Jaco.
Hello?
Okay, so it's just a compliment. I understand that the WCD use the prompt system for their laptops, which is a temporary profile. Now there are plenty of my colleagues who have been complaining that they were doing their assignment and they lost their assignment because of the laptops from the WCD, when they switch it off, they lose everything. Now, I was just wondering from what you were showing us, the bookmarks, if you have them in your tabs, will that have an impact if your laptop switches off because of the battery? Now that the laptops are wiping everything out. And the second the second thing that I want us to talk about, it's the video that you sent last week. I tried to access it to download it, but there was no option to download it because I wanted to download it and watch it, because sometimes the network is not working properly so that I can watch it yeah, without internet. Thank you very much, Jaco.
Okay, pleasure. So the first question regarding the assignment, look, it depends a lot on what the settings. It's difficult for me to say exactly what is going to happen depending on the assignment. If it's an online assignment that takes you through a number of steps, then often it's a case of if it's like a form that you need to complete. If you close the form, then it's probably going to lose the content that's been saved on that form, unfortunately. But if it's a document that you are working through, then if you're going to save it, the tabs, and you log in with your account again, then it should be able to recall. But it's difficult to say what the case is there. The video part, I'll just double check with Ashrik, because Ashrik shared the video. I'll just make 100% sure that the video was shared the way that it needs to be shared. And then I think with regards to that, if you just send me an email directly, then we can just try and tackle that one. If it's still a problem, we'll do that directly. Just to quickly answer Trevor's question. Right, I see this. I'll get to that now. I think Anita's answered the. Right, so the fundamentals 1 and 2, in terms of presenting it together, fundamentals 1 is actually an hour and a half, and fundamentals 2 is 2 hours. The idea is a lot of what I showed you now is supposed to be given time for them to actually do in a practical sense. It makes even more sense.
Thanks. That's a great relief to me. I was a bit worried that it was going to be a one course, because I didn't think there was enough time for exactly questioning and also considering the skills level of people. So yeah, it's great news. Thanks.
No, Trevor, I agree wholeheartedly with you. I don't think there's any way that you're going to be able to get through all of this in 2 hours with Teach. I'm assuming we're working with a cream of the crop here. That's the idea. That's why we can move quickly. Otherwise, yeah. I would never want to move this quickly with teachers.
Okay.
Then Wazir, let me just quickly read your question. Right, yes. You can create group sharing. The easiest way to do group sharing, often, just to show you this trick of doing it, is to do it. There are different ways of doing it, but I've always felt that the easiest way to do it is through contacts, using your contacts specifically. I just want to zoom out here a little bit. Right, so I've got a couple of labels set up for myself here. Now this isn't something entirely different, the contact sharing. So what you can do here with a contacts is I've got, for example, the circuit admin officers are grouped here, or have been added in a group over there. So sorry, we need to finish up now. My son is very keen on going for a walk now. But you'll see here I've got them already added as a group. So in other words, if I'm going to share something with them, let's just take this the scuba champions or anything like that. What happens here is, because I've got this label set up, if I'm in Google Drive now and I want to share something, then I can just enter, let's say we're going to say trainers. I think that's one of my, I can't remember. Right, so trainers, that's one of my groups. So I click on that and it immediately adds all the names in there. Right, so that's the easiest way of doing it, is through contacts. That's again, contacts.google.com. What you do is you add your different contacts, and then once you've got a contact added, so let's say, for example, I want to be with Albie, I can edit the contact, and then you'll see there's labels over here. I just click there and I just add different labels. So if I want to add him to the trainers label, I click there, and now he's part of the trainers. Right, now I'm just going to save that, and you'll see, I'm just going to update quickly enough. So now when I go to this and I say share, and I have got my group called trainers selected, you'll see that Albie Meyer is now right. You'll see that Albie is now also part of that list. Yeah, so the contacts is also, I don't even speak about contacts now, but contacts are incredibly useful little part of Google, again, that people don't use all the time. Adding these contacts, and again, it syncs with your phone, etc., etc. So I've got all the school email addresses and things like that. I've got synced there, so I can add things to schools, etc., etc. So contacts is the best way of doing it. There's other ways, but yeah, the other ways are a lot more, in my opinion, clumsy than this.